Let's dive into a world where failure isn't just an option, it's basically an expectation. This is the story of how some of the most advanced ships on the entire planet train for absolute disaster. And, what we can all learn from that. It really all kicks off with this mindset. For most of us, that old saying, anything that can go wrong will go wrong, it's kind of a pessimistic joke, right? But in the world of high-stakes engineering, it's the central design principle. It's a culture of, professional paranoia. And that is the very foundation of safety. But that begs a pretty big question, doesn't it? I mean, it's one thing to have a philosophy, but how in the world do you actually apply it when a ship the size of a skyscraper has to hold its position with pinpoint accuracy, sometimes for weeks on end? And that's where this incredible world of dynamic positioning comes in. This is the tech that lets these massive vessels do things that would have been straight-up science fiction just a few decades ago. So what is it exactly? Well, to put it simply, dynamic positioning, or DP for short, is basically the ship's brain and its central nervous system, all rolled into one. It's constantly taking in data from satellites and sensors, and then it's nonstop adjusting the ship's thrusters to fight against wind, waves, and current, just to hold it perfectly in place. And look, the need for this is absolutely critical. A failure here isn't just some small inconvenience. When you're talking about deep-sea oil rigs or giant offshore wind farms or even laying cables on the ocean floor, a loss of position could mean a catastrophic environmental disaster, total mission failure, and a direct threat to human lives. The stakes just don't get any higher. So to prevent that from ever happening, engineers have to embrace what you could call the gospel of what if. They don't design these systems hoping they won't fail. They design them assuming they absolutely will. And then they build the solutions for that inevitable failure right into the system from the start. This is how that professional paranoia really works in practice. It's not just a vague feeling. It's a checklist. You anticipate what can break. You build in backups. That's a concept called redundancy. You create detailed procedures for every emergency imaginable. And you manage risk obsessively. The whole thing fosters a culture where literally everyone is constantly asking, yeah, but what if? And this really shows you that core idea of redundancy. Think of it like layers of defense. A DP1 vessel is the most basic. One failure and you lose your position. Simple as that. A DP2 vessel, though, has backups. It can handle a single failure and keep right on going. But then you get to DP3. That is the ultimate fail-safe, designed to hold its ground even if something major like a fire or a flood takes out an entire section of the ship. But here's the thing, the best hardware in the world is only half the battle. The other half, that's the human element. How do you make sure the crew is ready to go when those alarms start blaring? Well, you practice, constantly. And that practice comes in 3 very different flavors. First up, you've got the live drill. Think of this as the full contact scrimmage for the crew. They simulate real failures like a generator suddenly going down or a thruster malfunctioning. This isn't theoretical, this is a real-time stress test of both the equipment and the team's response under some serious pressure. Next, you have the desktop drill. This is like a sports team watching the game tape. The crew gets together in a room and walks through what-if scenarios, or they'll analyze past incidents from their own ship or even other ships in the industry. It's all about strategy, communication, and making sure everyone knows the playbook inside and out. And finally, there's the touch drill. This one's like a pregame walkthrough. The crew physically goes through the motions, they'll reach for the controls, point to the right switches, but without actually activating anything. It's all about building that procedural familiarity and muscle memory in a completely safe, controlled environment. And these drills are so critical because at the end of the day, sometimes the final layer of redundancy isn't a piece of hardware at all. It's a person. There are specific situations where a single failure can only be contained by a quick, correct manual action. That trained operator is the last line of defense, and that's exactly why this practice is absolutely non-negotiable. Okay, so if you're going to practice, you have to do it right. I mean, an effective drill is so much more than just going through the motions. It's a really structured process that's designed for one thing, maximum learning. And that process is a continuous loop. It always starts with a realistic plan and a really thorough briefing to get the whole team on the same page. Then you execute the drill. But honestly, the most critical steps happen after it's over. A totally honest debrief about what went right and what went wrong, and then a formal record to make sure every single lesson learned leads to a permanent improvement. And this is just so important. The drill itself, that's just the test. The real learning, the real value, happens in the debrief. It's that moment for honest, totally blame-free assessment, where the entire team figures out how to be better next time. This is where continuous improvement is actually born. So when you put all of this together, you've got the engineering, the hardware, the constant practice. It all adds up to more than just a set of procedures. It creates a culture. And the ultimate takeaway here is that in these incredibly demanding environments, you just can't leave anything to chance. Success, safety, excellence, they don't happen by accident. They don't happen because you got lucky. No, they are the direct result of a culture that fully 100% embraces Murphy's Law. It's a culture that humbly accepts that things will break, mistakes will be made, and the only way to succeed is to be relentlessly, obsessively prepared for that reality. And this leaves us with a final thought. This professional paranoia is absolutely essential out at sea. But what if we applied it somewhere else? What could your industry, or hey, even your own life, gain from shifting focus from just hoping for the best to relentlessly preparing for the worst?